Mama, she was a medicine person. She was a healer. She knew all the plants and the herbs, and would go out into the woods and harvest the plants or dig the roots and prepare those medicines. And she would doctor people. People would send for her back in the days when there were no doctors for the Indian people and the various communities of our Indian folk. They were, of course, didn't have not only a doctor, there were no cars or anything back then, and so they would send for my big mama, and she would ride a horse, and she would go to that person to doctor them. And then if a person passed, she always was the one to take care of the body as well. And back in those days, things were a lot different when someone passed away. But my big mama would prepare the body. She would wash the body, prepare the body. And she also sewed a type of garment that was wrapped. The body was wrapped in for burial, and the word for that was passed down to me was shroud abaledi, and abaledi in Mvskoke means to wrap around. So it was some type of garment that she would sew. And they would take down a window in the house or take down a door. They would get 2 chairs and lay that on the back of those chairs, and then they would lay the body out on that board, and they called it a cooling board. And back in those days, there were cooling boards that were manufactured. Of course, our folks didn't have access to any of that, but they, would use a window or a door or something for that purpose. And then they would have the wake, and people would come to the home, and they would sit all night. They never left the body, but they sat all night, and the house would be filled. Outside there would be a lot of people. Men would build a coffin out of whatever materials that they had, but they would sit with the family and with the deceased and sing hymns, sing songs, and then the next day they would immediately go to the cemetery or wherever they had designated to bury the person. They would put the person in the coffin on the back of a wagon, and the wagon would be pulled by oxen or a mule or something, and they would have the processional to the burial site, and people would walk along the sides of the wagon and place their hands on the wagon, and then they would get to the burial site, and they would go ahead then and bury the body, and that was it. There was not a funeral held at that time. They would wait for a period. It could be a few months later, and at a designated time, when the family or the person that was designated within the family made the decision that it was time to end the period of mourning for the person, then they would have a funeral service, and Sometimes that was at a church, if there was one. And of course, before there were any churches, I don't know if they would actually have it at the graveside or where they would have it, but my great aunt, her name was Ruby Barnhill. She was my grandmother's sister, and she was a little bit older than my granny. And so she remembered more about those days because she would go a lot with my big mama when she went out into the woods to get her plants and her roots, and she would go with her, everywhere she went, a lot of times, and help her. And so she remembered a lot of those old ways. And so the funeral they referred to, as far as Aunt Ruby, she referred to it as the Indian cry. And that would just be a time of tears, grief, mourning, just a heavy period of mourning for that designated service, the Indian cry. And then when that ended, that was the end of the mourning period. And immediately after that, they all had a big communal meal. And that would be a happy time. It would be a time of celebration and happiness. And that was, I hear him again. He's flying right over my head, or she. It's beautiful. But that was the way they did things back then with when someone passed away. I appreciate you for watching. Please give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And once again, I will see you. Adam, Jihijah, please. Come on now.